How are we doing today, folks? I hope everything's going good. I hope your holiday season is going along great. And for y'all that are in college, I hope you're done. If you're not, I know you're on that last final stretch. I just ended my semester yesterday, thank God. Barely just passed over the line. I'm exhausted. But so today I want to talk about something a little more personal to me. When I say that, something a little more annoying. So I'm going to really try to keep my stature on this one. So I had to do research papers for all my classes this semester. For one of them, I had to do basically on a topic or an issue that is really pressing on America right now. And so I titled my paper and I did it on "Is America Racist?" So my teacher, this professor of comparative politics, very far left, very much to the left, very ignorant of conservative ideals, or at least of how conservative ideals work. He might know them, but he might just know them rhetorically and not actually know them when they're put into effect. Or maybe he does, he just doesn't care anyways. But he gave me a grade that I feel was insufficient for the amount of work I put in, for the amount of sources I cited, and really for just the amount of information that I dug up to show that America is not racist, starting from our founding days, from our founding fathers, from the drafting of the Constitution and even the Declaration of Independence, to really nowadays. And you know, the popular arguments now of black incarceration and Donald Trump and all the stupid arguments that are really just steeped in lies and just unsubstantiated opinions. So I just want to read off a couple comments of his and go over them and just show how ridiculous it is. And this is just a little idea as to how liberal teachers think. Now I'm sure y'all that have liberal teachers know how they think, and it drives you crazy, and maybe you don't have proper arguments, or you just don't know enough, or maybe you just don't care enough to research, not because you don't care to be right, but just because it's maybe researching that stuff doesn't really interest you as much, which is kind of why I'm here, because I love it. So I'll skim through the ones that are important, and I'll go to the couple ones that are important. So he titled this "Other Evidence." He said, "Paper ignores key facts and important periods in history. For example, despite rhetoric and drafting of a Declaration of Independence," he means despite the rhetoric of the Founding Fathers, and even Frederick Douglass, whom I mentioned in my paper, despite rhetoric and drafting of the Declaration of Independence, difficult to make a case for Jefferson, since he was a slave owner throughout his life. He also believed that blacks were genetically / intellectually inferior to whites. This is well documented. Now, both of those are true. Jefferson obviously was a slave owner for much of his life, and Jefferson actually admitted through his observation. Jefferson did not sit there, with like how the left might think the average racist was back in the days on their porch watching their slaves work on the field while they spat out tobacco to chew. That's not at all. That wasn't Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was not a man sat there bigoted and just hating blacks and hating Africans. He said that from his, and I mentioned this in my paper, from Jefferson's experiences and numerous letters to numerous people that he wrote to, family members and not, he described that from what he had observed throughout his life, that he felt the African population was just they had the same mental faculties and capabilities as man, but he felt as if it was just somehow underdeveloped. Is really what would be the best word to describe it. Underdeveloped. He didn't feel as if black people could never be to the level of whites. He did question if blacks and whites could live together harmoniously, and obviously these are wrong, and thank God that he was wrong looking at a country nowadays. But as de Tocqueville notes in his book Democracy in America, really in history, and he was a great French scholar as well, really in history, as we've seen, and this is unfortunate, but this is just human nature, folks. This has nothing to do with race. This is just human nature. Is when you've seen white people, so to speak, at the strongest, you've seen black people enslaved. And vice versa, when you've seen black people at the strongest, in the presence of whites, you've seen white people destroyed and killed. Obviously not to say that whites didn't kill blacks either. But the point is that the two races, and races in general, have really struggled. And this goes back to human nature. I don't want to get too off topic for a second, but before you start thinking, oh, well, maybe that's some sort of proof of America being racist, no, it's not. Human nature, and me being a Christian as well, I really truly believe in the fallenness of man, so to speak. Human nature is susceptible to evil. It's susceptible to sin. Now, is human nature inherently racist? I don't believe so, but it is inherently susceptible to evil, and racism is one of those evils, along the lines with a whole hell of a lot of other evils and immoral attitudes and acts. So, anyways, I noted in this, for part of one of the paragraphs, I said, Thomas Jefferson was also a strong abolitionist, taking action in his life to assure that the practice would one day end in America. Very, very true. Jefferson felt that slavery was contrary to the laws of nature and that it posed the greatest threat to America's success. He believed this, and Jefferson actually feared that a great conflict would come one day if abolitionists were not elected to office, which obviously happened, and over 600,000 Americans died in that war. Continually, he says, in his book, Notes on the State of Virginia, written in 1781, Jefferson notes that he wishes for the emancipation of such a degrading practice, continually further commenting that slavery was against the liberties endowed by God and are not to be taken away by man. Unfortunately, he ended up realizing that he wasn't going to be able to end slavery in his lifetime. Anyways, so he continued to say, and here's another thing. Here's another point. So when my teacher mentioned the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, upon the grievances that the founding fathers had towards the king, one of them was going to be, but it was later for whatever reason taken out. I was gonna guess because it would probably anger the southern states at the time, and they wouldn't want to join the Union, which would have been crucial. Which was the whole point of the 3/5 Compromise, but that's a whole different video. And so, basically, Jefferson wanted to actually implement a line in the Declaration of Independence, a grievance towards the king, saying how he has stopped certain colonies, not all of them, but certain colonies from really abolishing slavery within the borders. So several states wanted to abolish slavery, colonies, wanted to abolish slavery, even before the United States ever existed, and before the Declaration of Independence. And they tried, but the Crown and King George kept denying it because they wanted the profit. The king kept wanting to keep taking the profit from the slave trade and from slave work in the colonies. And that really pissed off a lot of the founding fathers, including Jefferson. When it came to Jefferson owning slaves, Virginia law in the past, Virginia was very heavily pro-slavery in the past, and Virginia law permitted that even if you were to free your slaves, they would still have to go to another. They couldn't just be free. So if you were to free your slaves from yourself, you would have to give them to somewhere else. And he really feared, same with Washington, really feared breaking up families. Washington actually expressed great sorrow for the thought of breaking apart slave families. And not only that, Jefferson didn't want to partake in the practice anymore. He thought the practice was disgusting, and he knew that it would continue for his slaves. He wasn't some slave owner sitting there on the porch with his whip, ready to go lynch one of them or whatever the liberals today want to say. That wasn't at all the case. He hated slavery, he hated the institution of it. But you have to judge people at their time, unfortunately, and unfortunately, due to European culture, slavery was brought over here. But what do you expect of what would you do in that situation? What would you really do? Would you free them and want to continue that kind of just the vicious cycle of selling and not selling and breaking apart families and everything else? Or this isn't a justification of slavery or holding slaves or not holding slaves. It's just judging in his time. What would you do? It's a really tough decision to make, and I wouldn't want to make it. Continually speaking, when it comes to real quick, because I want to move on. I don't want this video to be too long. There's just so much I can cram in here. Talking about Jefferson's opinions when it came to one more second. When it came to genetics and everything like that, he said, from his observations of African slaves, he felt that blacks were intellectually inferior. True. An opinion that he admittedly hesitated to express, given the opportunities to develop their, as he put, genius was unfavorable. He basically saying blacks have the same faculties as white people, but their opportunities throughout history have not been the same. Given given the expansion of Western culture and then the inhibition of African culture and the warring that happened there and everything else, that would be far too long for this video. So, nevertheless, Jefferson expressed that he was open and wanting to change his opinion on the matter, stating religiously that no one wishes more than he to see a refutation of his doubts, and no one wishes more than he, said on several occasions as well, to see the abolition of slavery. A wish that would be granted to him when people such as Henry Gregory, or he's French name. I can't say it right. I'm not going to try to slaughter it. French scholar and Benjamin Banneker, a black mathematician and scientist, would write Jefferson cordially overturning his tepid assumptions. So basically, Jefferson took the information from this French scholar and from this black mathematician and scientist, and he actually sent them to other people and said, "Thank you so much for these letters. I want proof to change my mind," because he basically he knows it's like he wants to be proven wrong, and in a sense he knows that they're capable of it, but he wants to be proven that fact that they're capable of being on the same, I guess what he would say, the same intellectual status as whites at the time. So was he some sort of bigoted racist sitting there hating blacks? No, of course he wasn't. And he even mentions that just because he from his observations he is seeing a slow development with Africans doesn't mean that they are now it is right to strip them of their rights endowed by the Creator. He mentioned that as well. So let me see if I can wrap this up quicker. I talked about that a lot longer than I thought I would. So continually, he says, important to note that the Constitution legitimized slavery for a long period of time. Several articles embedded, of course, changes that have been made post-Civil War. Important to note the Constitution legitimized slavery. Frederick Douglass, a former black slave, often referred to as an Uncle Tom, of course, because of his support for Lincoln and being a Republican and this and that. So Frederick Douglass, very famous back in the day. Like I said, he was a former slave, a hardcore abolitionist. Obviously, I mean, you're gonna be a hardcore abolitionist at that time. But he actually spoke against the extreme abolitionists that really thought it was kind of moral to do whatever it took to end slavery, which means killing people and this and that. And against the, they were called Garrisonians because of Harry Lord Garrison, an ardent abolitionist, really kind of led this movement. So basically what happened was the Garrisonians thought that the Constitution legitimized slavery. And what Frederick Douglass refutes that, basically saying, well, no, that's not right at all. The Constitution does not inherently... He thought it was really stupid and really just intellectually dishonest to even try to propagate that the Constitution... Sorry, I'm trying to look for it right now for my writings on it. But basically saying that it's really intellectually dishonest to state that the Founding Fathers had a hidden message to support slavery. Okay, so I find it. So I said, so Frederick Douglass, a former slave, detested the notion that the Constitution guaranteed slavery. As Douglass stated, he denies that the Constitution offers men as property and believed the best way to end slavery was to elect men who supported abortion. Continually, he argues with the belief that the founders secretly meant to support slavery through abstract interpretation. Douglass argued that whatever personal views the individual founders had, what is important are the words in the Constitution as a result of the debates. He supplements this view, saying that it is absurd to try and guess by ignorant and dishonest means what the founders truly meant, but were too ashamed to express. Douglass comments that the founders purposely kept their discussions of the Constitution a secret so that the people would ratify the words of the document and not the hypothetical secret motives or unspoken intentions. The secret discussions were not entered into the document, and therefore only the paper itself, with its own clearly written purposes, is the Constitution. These are the words of Frederick Douglass, a former slave, saying it is stupid to think that there's some sort of hidden racist or hidden pro-slavery agenda within the interpretation of the Constitution. Reading that actually kind of turned me to a more pro-textualist reading of it, a more Scalia reading of the Constitution instead of an originalist reading of the Constitution, which are really similar. There's more to this. Maybe I'll make a second video on it, but I just don't want to go too long. I'll just go what he ends with. He ends with a pro-civil rights. He ends with saying this. So, trying to cover too much here, need to dig deeper into the evidence presented. I present a lot of evidence. I don't want to make this video too long. But he said more discussion of incarceration rates, however. At the same time, punitive laws are not the only explanation for incarceration rates. Socioeconomic status and the lack of resources are key explanations of incarceration rates, referring to blacks specifically. To say that it is a function of the degradation of the family unit is a leap in logic. Let me read that one more time for you folks, because it actually kind of made me laugh when I read it. To say that it is a function of the degradation of the family unit is a leap in logic. So what my teacher is basically saying is that to say that the degradation of the family unit for people in general, but specifically black people when it came to this part of my paper, and black Americans, did not result in higher crime rates. That is one of the most ignorant if not uneducated lines I've ever heard. Because as we see in America with any race, houses that generally have a single parent home, especially a single mother home, tend to be poorer, unfortunately, and tend to result with the kids being more susceptible to committing crime. And when 77%, or at least over 75%, 75, 77, it's teetered here and there within the last couple of years, are born out of wedlock. And when 40% of black males are not graduating from high school, this is the problem. This is what the problem is, and I address this in the paper. And he thinks that it has to do with the socioeconomic status and the lack of resources. So because you're poor, apparently to my professor, because you're a poor American of any race, of any ethnicity, that somehow gives you the right, or the righteous indignation to cause crime, to break into places, and to steal, and to pillage, basically. That's what my professor is saying. This is how ignorant the left is. And this is how ignorant our liberal professors are. For him to say that it is a leap in logic for the degradation of the family, to say that the degradation of the family unit results in higher crime rates of the kids is just an absolute fallacy. It's really asinine. And I would go, and I'll post up my sources for it. But just given FBI statistics every year when it comes to the crime rates of blacks and whites, and given that how crack cocaine laws were really pushed by black congressmen in Harlem and Queens, and seeing as how crack cocaine laws are the same per ounce as meth, which is heavily used by whites and more heavily used by Hispanics than are blacks, well then it should be racist towards whites and Hispanics, shouldn't it? If whites are being locked up more for meth, this is this is coming from a teacher who just basically who wants America to be racist, and looking at the facts, whether he's ever seen this exact data or not, cannot possibly fathom that it's just because of individual responsibility. Just because you're rich doesn't give you the right. It doesn't mean that it give you the right to treat people like they're lesser. Just because you're poor doesn't give you the right to now steal and to now break the law. And morality goes beyond money. Morality goes beyond material, and we need to realize this. And my teacher is willing to do apparently whatever it takes, and willing to turn a blind eye to whatever facts it is when he's trying to label America racist. Anyways, folks, I can go about this all day. Sorry if I went a little too long with this. I thought y'all might be interested to watch this. Please go follow my Twitter, TCC1776, at TCC1776, or also just The College Conservative, no spaces. Thank you so much, folks. Please like, share, comment, hate, love, doesn't matter to me. Spread me around, and I'd also like to at some point, or even now, if y'all ever have questions about something that your professor says, maybe during this last semester, or any semester, or even the future semesters, and you're just wondering how to refute it, or you're wondering if it's right or wrong, or whatever, send them to me. I want to try to move in a direction where since I'm moving out of college soon enough, to where now I am researching the questions that you have, that your professors have said, or that I'm refuting the things and the bogus lies that your leftists and your liberal professors have said, whether they know it's true or whether they've just been indoctrinated because of their own education in the past. So thank you so much, folks. Have a good rest of your day. Like I said, I hope you're enjoying the holiday spirit, and I'll see you folks soon. My name is Wyatt, and I'm the College Conservative.